All right, can people hear me okay? I think I see nodding. Trying to look at for videos that are on. Do I see nodding? Thumbs up, okay, cool. All right. Have a few more people just filing into the weight room, but we'll get going soon. I have muted the mics on my end because it was getting a lot of feedback. We've got a pretty good turnout, and so it's a lot of background noise. But you should all still have the ability to turn your mics back on at any point. If you don't want to do that, or if you still want to ask a question or make a comment, I also have my chat window open. You can open your chats too, and feel free to type any questions or comments in there if that's easier than turning the mic on. But absolutely, I want to encourage this to be interactive. I know that's going to be our goal today, is not just be talking at you, but give you a chance to answer questions or ask questions, share ideas, etc. So feel free at any point to turn your cameras on, to turn your mics on. I just did that for these initial pieces to keep the background noise kind of to a minimum. All right, so I think I'm gonna jump right into it because I haven't had anyone else jump into the waiting room for a minute. So welcome everybody to our presentation on fostering dogs with behavior needs. I'm really excited that we're having such interest and such a good turnout tonight. For those of you who maybe I haven't met or aren't familiar with me, my name's Angela, and I'm the dog behavior specialist at HSHV. I'm also a trainer and behavior consultant in the community. So I have the benefit of working with dogs, both in the shelter and in foster and in their homes. So it's really fun to be able to see that progression. Often I have clients that have come from the shelter, and it's really nice seeing that go through the entire cycle, and knowing all the good work that the volunteers and fosters have done that contribute to those dogs getting into those homes. And I'm lucky to be joined tonight by one of those wonderful fosters who's been fostering for us for a long time, Moni, who will be available to answer questions from a much more like hands-on foster experience, because she's kind of done it all. So we'll be looking forward to having her input as well. And then Anne-Marie is with us as well, our new foster coordinator. So Moni and then maybe Anne-Marie, do you want to turn your mics on quickly and just say hi and give yourself a little introduction?
So I'll go. So hi, everyone. I'm Moni Dressler, and I currently am fostering Julius. And Julius, as best as I can count, is foster dog number 51. So,
oh my gosh.
So, and I'll certainly be glad to share, my contact information. So if there are any questions, or if you just want to vent about your foster dog driving you crazy, you can do that too. But the main thing I think is to make sure that people know that fostering is a community thing. And so knowing other fosters is really helpful, and it's really worthwhile. So I'd really encourage you to help out however you can. So, and thank you for your interest. So I'll turn it over to Anne-Marie.
Hi, I'm Anne-Marie. I'm the foster manager. I know I've talked to a lot of you over email, but it's nice to see some of your faces, put a face to the name. But I'm just here kind of in the background. The real stars are going to be Angela and Moni.
Thanks for joining us, Anne-Marie. So as I said, we want to give today as much to you getting your questions answered as possible. Some of you may have attended or watched the recording of a similar presentation I did last year on fostering dogs with behavior challenges, where I went into more detail about kind of specific common behavior concerns. That recording is available, and right now, it is, I think, part of the requirement to be able to foster some of these dogs that maybe have some more behavior challenges or need some work, that you watch that. And I don't want to reinstate everything that's out there. I want to give this opportunity to be some more fresh content. So I won't be going into all the little details as much as I did last year, though I'm happy to answer detailed questions about any issues that you do have concerns about. So I'm going to try to talk hopefully pretty briefly, though I'm not always good at that when you get me going on behavior, but talk somewhat briefly about what we're talking about, what we mean when we're talking about fostering dogs that maybe have some behavior concerns or needs, and talk maybe just generally about some of the best practices for success, both from how do we want to think about things from a training perspective, and also just management, preventing problems from happening, setting dogs up for success, some just tips and tricks to help you have and your dog have a more successful experience. Some reminders as far as just some of the overall general rules for fostering dogs and some of the specific things that are important to keep in mind if you're fostering dogs that might have some behavioral challenges. And then we're going to try to open up, if Moni wants to share some tips from her experience of fostering 50 plus dogs, we're gonna give her a chance to talk to us, and then open it up to ask all of us questions about, specific issues, concerns with processes, what to do if you have a behavior problem with the dog, if you have an issue that you found challenging, share information, talk about what might be helpful to you or what you might need more of in support of working with behavior issues, and kind of talk about the resources that are available to you. And as I said, feel free, even though we will open things up to Q&A at the end, if you want to pop in anything in the chat or turn your mic on for something, feel free. So Anne-Marie and I have talked a lot in the last few weeks or months about what is it we're talking about? What are these kind of categories of dogs with, behavior needs, or sometimes the lingo we end up using is behavior dogs. So kind of talking about what are we saying? And it's been helpful for our part too, to think of these in sort of a couple categories. Any of you who maybe have volunteered with animals at the shelter might be familiar with this term blue dot. Blue dot is sort of the lingo and the signal that we use in the shelter to indicate an animal that might have some somewhat more challenging behaviors or needs someone with a little more experience or expertise or patience to work with them. So when people go through the cat comforting or the dog walking program, they can right away work with all of our level 1 or non-blue dot animals. And then after they get a little bit of experience and some additional training, we open up these blue dot animals to be walked or comforted in the cat program. And we're using similar terminology with our foster program now. So talking about blue dot fosters. To foster blue dot dog, this means this is likely a dog that has some particular needs or might need some help working on certain issues, but they are available for adoption. So these are dogs that we have done behavior assessments on. We've already decided on what if any adoption restrictions there might be, though we always appreciate feedback of things you learn in the home. But maybe they're struggling in a shelter environment, they're more challenging to walk, they've got some on leash reactivity or some fear that we need some help with, that we think they would benefit from getting that extra work in foster. So maybe slightly more challenging than your level 1 dog, but dogs that are up for adoption and just need a little bit more support. Basically, at this point, if you have gone through the foster training and the additional watching of the behavior video from last year, that makes you eligible to start taking these blue dot foster dogs. We do have another level now that we're talking about kind of our behavior treatment or evaluation fosters. So these are going to be animals that are not currently available for adoption, likely due to some behavior concerns that we're trying to assess and work with. And to foster those dogs, you will need to be a Blue Dot approved foster who has also had some prior fostering experience, because these might take a little more work or expertise. So reasons we might send these not available behavior evaluation or treatment dogs to foster would be to help us get some more information on how they behave in a home. Sometimes dogs' behavior in a shelter environment is much different than how it will be once they're out. We may need some help in working on some training that is challenging or impossible to do in a shelter environment. For example, if a dog has separation anxiety, we really can't do much about that in a shelter environment, because we aren't there 24 hours a day. So we might need a special kind of foster who can kind of work and see if they can make some progress in modifying that. If you choose to foster dogs in these behavior stages, the behavior team will want to be in close contact with you. So we'll want your feedback and your observations. We will talk to you about any behavior plan we want you to work on. Sometimes that might be a very specific thing. Sometimes it might be like, let this dog, get into a quiet environment and sleep for a couple days, and then tell us, how they're looking and what you're seeing. But what's really important is that your honest input is really critical to us being able to carefully evaluate and assess and help these dogs. So we really want our behavior evaluation fosters to be comfortable being very open with us and honest, and willing to kind of follow recommendations and work on a plan. And the other thing to know is that with these dogs, if through the course of working with them, we come to the conclusion that the behavior issues are just too significant to be safely placed in the community, and they're not proving to be very easily modifiable or manageable, it is possible that humane euthanasia may be the outcome. So I just like to say this because fostering these types of dogs might not be for everybody. And there are plenty of Blue Dot dogs out there that still need some help and some behavior work that you can do great things with. So consider this possibility and how that would feel, and if you are comfortable with kind of the additional challenges, both in the work it takes and the emotional investment for working with dogs that are not yet available. This isn't to say that we can guarantee that, we are a shelter and we have to constantly be reassessing and making sure the dogs are good candidates for placement in the community. So it's not to say that our Blue Dot dogs, that this isn't an outcome that could be faced, but hopefully it's much less likely, because hopefully we have a better idea of these dogs and feel that they are adaptable. Any questions so far about those categories, the terminology we're using, any of that, or anything that you would add or that I have gotten wrong, Anne Marie or Moni?
No, I think that all sounds really good.
Okay.
And yeah, thank you for explaining it too as well.
Yeah. All right. So given that these dogs might need some help, we don't want to just send them home and have you trying to figure out how to deal with it. So we are always striving to offer as many levels of behavior support as we can. And so I just want to kind of go over as a reminder of things that are available to you, because sometimes people don't realize that this is something you could ask for. But the behavior team is available before the dog even goes to your home if you want to discuss a specific dog's needs, especially if they're not yet available. They're in evaluation or assessment, wanting to know the full history. Like, we can have a conversation with you on the phone or Zoom before you pick up, or if we're available at the time of pickup, maybe meet with you and the dog to kind of talk about what the concerns are, what to watch for, what their needs are. And in some cases, we may very much require a consult with the behavior team before you bring that dog home. Some of you, if you've fostered before, might be familiar with the Maddie's Pet Assistant app that you can download for your phone. and it will kind of survey, ask you how it's going, and it can give you some immediate tips and advice for a wide variety of pretty common behavior issues. The advice is pretty good, and it gives you links to other resources that can often answer a simple question like, you know, troubleshooting house training issues or mouthy behavior or things like that. So that can give you some immediate feedback, and it also will forward your responses to the behavior and foster team so that we'll be able to review and see kind of what's going on as well. The behavior team is always available via email or phone for quick questions. And also I've been doing Zoom consults for longer discussions. If we want to really talk about a more detailed behavior plan, or you're having more specific questions, you need a longer talk, or if you want to be able to turn the camera on you and the dog and work on some training exercises, that's an option as well. So I don't know that people always realize that we're willing and able to help out that way. So please take us up with that offer. We're glad to give you some more training and tips and support. And that said, we ask that if you're having trouble, please do reach out to us for help. Training and behavior is not a regulated industry. Anyone can call themselves a professional, unfortunately. So there's a lot of bad advice. There's a lot of good advice out there, but we ask that you don't go soliciting advice off of Facebook or hiring a third-party trainer to come to your home, because we don't know what kind of information you might be getting. It might be good, but it might be actually counterproductive. So reach out to us for help if you're looking for resources. We've got, you know, lots that we can give you. And if you are not comfortable, not able to follow a behavior plan, let us know. We can refoster. There's plenty of other animals and ways that you can help out that aren't going to involve kind of having to work on the behavior plans. I'll pause briefly. Any questions so far? All right. So in addition to kind of the behavior consulting support that we want to offer our fosters, there is medical support for our behavior cases frequently as well. So many of our fosters and many of the Blue Dot and behavior evaluation fosters, some of you may know, are very likely to be prescribed anti-anxiety medication. And one of the most common questions we get, often within 24 hours of a dog going to foster, is, can we take them off the medication now? Please continue the meds in your home. Please follow the veterinarian's recommendations as far as timing and dosage. Don't be making changes or discontinuing meds, and let us know when you need refills. One thing that is hard, I think, whether it's in fostering or people's owned animals, or even in the human mental health industry as well, is that sometimes compliance can be hard, because if these medications are working, then the individual hopefully does not appear to be having anxiety problems. That's the goal. So sometimes people will say, well, like, they're not anxious, they're fine, they don't look like they have anxiety at all. They were prescribed those meds for a reason. And sometimes it's not just shelter behavior. Sometimes dogs have been surrendered with a long history of generalized anxiety or certain fears or separation anxiety that we know about. Or they came to us with meds and the owners had reported that they helped. Understand that the goal is that the animal doesn't look anxious. And if they're doing well, the medication may be an important component of why they're doing well. Really, I kind of think about, for most individuals, anti-anxiety medication is going to be something more like taking insulin versus taking an antibiotic. It's something that for many individuals will need some maintenance to help them continue along feeling good and looking good. And success in a training plan often can really be facilitated by some of this support. It's not something that once we've given some pills for, it's fixed and cured and we can just stop. So the meds might be part of the reason why they're doing better in your home. We might have past information that leads us to believe that it is a integral part of why they're doing well. And when they're in our care, my perspective and our veterinarian's perspective is if things are going well, we're not going to mess with it. Once dogs go to their forever homes, adopters can make those decisions. They can discuss with their veterinarians or their behavior professionals that they choose to hire what a long-term plan might be. But in sheltering, when we figure things are going well, we don't want to rock the boat. So contact us if you have concerns about maybe side effects, or if you think it's having an adverse reaction. If we think the meds are actually doing some harm, yes, the veterinarians will want to revisit, but know that we're unlikely to want to take them off simply because they've been in foster for a day or a week or a month or 4 months, or because they're doing good. It's going good, that's our goal, let's keep it that way. And understand that discontinuing some of these meds suddenly can have negative side effects. So it's not something we want to just stop without advice from a veterinarian. I'm going to pause because this is a question that I know the foster department, the vet team, and I get a lot of questions about. So does anyone have anything they want to ask or any concerns about behavior meds? All right. So in general, we want to think about when we're modifying behavior, reinforcing the behaviors that we do want, and reinforcement, if the animal decides what's reinforcing. So often we're talking about things that they really like treats, food, toys, play, likely something more than just praise and pets. Lots of dogs enjoy affection and attention too, but you'll probably have better results faster if we increase what we pay them with, and don't feel bad about being generous with good things that they like. We also want to prevent the rehearsal of behaviors that we don't want, and that really falls into management, which I'm going to talk about quite a bit in the next few slides. But really taking a proactive approach as much as possible. I don't want to be reacting to a problem after it's happened, but I want to arrange environments and situations so that dogs are likely to be successful and bad habits just don't have the opportunity to be practiced. And along the lines of being proactive, catch them being right, reward the behaviors that you want to see more of, and those things will continue more and more. We also want to, within obvious, within reason, allowing for choice and respecting their choices. That doesn't mean you need to let your fosters just, run rampant around the house, but when we can give them opportunities to have some control over their outcomes, it will do a lot, especially if you're fostering dogs with fear. That's the main time I really want fosters to think about paying attention to dogs' body language and what their choices are, if they want to approach, if they want to interact, if they want to go for a walk, if they want to meet somebody or not. And if they're retreating, avoiding, taking their time. A lot of times when fearful dogs go into foster, it might take a few days. You might have a few days of they're still shut down and not exhibiting much behavior at all. And that can be really upsetting and concerning to watch a dog that doesn't want to come out of their crate a few days, or scared to go outside. But being patient and allowing them to do that at their pace is going to do a lot to help them feel in control and feel more confident. So we're not going to flood them by just tossing them into the deep end of the pool, forcing them in situations they're not ready for, but respect their decisions. And if they're choosing to retreat, just be patient and take it slow. And we aren't using any punishment-based tools or methods, anything that's going to cause pain or avoidance, because while those methods might change behavior, they also carry with it some emotional baggage. They can create or worsen fear responses, reactivity responses, aggression responses. So we want to keep you safe. We want to keep our dogs behaviorally healthy. The good news is we don't have to do anything unpleasant in order to meet those goals. Pause in case anyone has any questions about methods. I talk a lot more about kind of methods and how it relates to specific challenges in the recording from last year. Again, I'm happy to answer specifics kind of when we get to the Q&A if you want to talk about reactivity or resource guarding or anything. But the general framework is be proactive and reward the things we want. All right, so just a few reminders. Some of these kind of are around just rules for safety and just setting our dogs up to have successful experiences. So most of the coming slides are going to be talking about management and just that idea of setting our dogs up for success. But one thing to remember is the importance of containment for your foster dogs. Dogs must be physically contained or connected at all times. So that means they need to be on leash or behind a secure physical fence whenever they're with you. So please, no off-leash walks at the ARB. If your yard's not fenced, even if you're out in the countryside, no letting them out to just roam, even if they're attended, and no training to an invisible fence if you happen to have an invisible fence for your dog. They'll need to be either behind a sturdy physical fence or connected to you with something physical. You know, we don't want to lose our dogs. If we have a dog with a lot of fear, we don't want them to bolt and flee because they're not used to their new environment or because someone startles them. Some of you might foster. One category of animals that we put in foster requests for are dogs that maybe don't actually belong to us. So dogs that are part of an ongoing court case are eligible for fostering, or that are part of our Safe Harbor program. So sometimes you might be fostering dogs that don't actually belong to HHB, and we don't want to be losing somebody else's dog or a dog that's evidence in an ongoing case. So being very careful about that physical containment. I would still supervise when they're outside, even if they're in a fenced area, especially when first coming home, so that you can evaluate if they can clear your fence. You know, when you first bring them home, I would have them also with some redundancy, having leashes attached, walking the perimeter, keeping an eye on them, so you don't discover any weak points in the fencing when your dog has slipped out. If that does happen, notify the foster team immediately. We're not gonna get you in trouble. We want to come out and help get that dog back to safety. So please tell us immediately if that happens. When letting your foster dogs interact with others, whether that's other animals or other people, please follow the recommendations and restrictions that the foster behavior team has notified you. So if we have dogs that are available for adoption, but they've been designated that they can't go to a home with children or with cats or with dogs, don't be introducing your dogs to those groups. There might be some good reasons for why we would have concern about that. If they are not available for adoption, then we ask that they are not being introduced or meeting other dogs or people yet, unless you're explicitly given permission by the behavior team. If we have some concerns about a dog that's shown some kind of barking, stranger danger with new people, we probably want to give them a chance to decompress and settle into your home, and then talk to you about your observations, how they're doing on walks, just seeing other people, and then think about what a plan would be for seeing if they're ready to start meeting someone new. So until you've been given the okay, if you have a dog that's not available for adoption, please try to keep it to your household members that are interacting. And regardless of whether the dog is available or not available, if they're dog friendly and able to go with other dogs or not, no dog parks. Just too much uncertainty, risk, and potential liability if something were to happen. So even if you are fostering a dog social dog, we ask that they are not going to dog parks or daycares or any of that. So one of the big things fostering can do is just reduce stress levels. And sometimes just bringing stress down is the behavior plan itself, and maybe very little else needs to be done. And the shelter is a stressful environment. A lot of times dogs maybe have been there for a little while before they go to foster and have spent a prolonged amount of time under high levels of anxiety. And what they really need to do in those first days out of the shelter is decompress and relax. So when you bring your foster dog home, that's not the time to go for a big run in the park and stop by the pet supply store and go showing them to the neighbors and all of that. What your dog probably wants to do is come home and sleep. Sleep deprivation is a huge thing in shelters. They're noisy, they're busy, they're active. Dogs, adult dogs as well, spend, generally about an average 18 hours a day sleeping, and that simply doesn't happen in a shelter. So you might find that the first thing that happens when you bring them home is they pass out on the couch and want to lay there for 2 days, and that's fine, and that's probably what they need. So really just want to stress how important that rest and relaxation is for them, especially in those first few days. Some of our dogs in behavior treatment or even Blue Dot dogs might be sensitive to body handling, invasive grooming, things like that. Or we're just in general trying to build their confidence, reduce their stress. So only medically necessary grooming should be done, and it should be done by us at HSHV. So this is, we don't want you picking up your foster dog and taking them to Pet Supplies Plus. Please don't pick them up and bring them home and drop them in the bathtub and give them a toenail trim, etc. Don't swing by the groomer. I understand that they might be a little bit matted or a little bit dirty. We can talk to you about maybe some less invasive ways of cleaning them up if they're really kind of looking like they've been out in the countryside for a little bit before they came to you. We often have like waterless shampoo and wipes that we can clean them up a little bit with. If it's really bad, if they're very, very matted, kind of unsanitary, uncomfortable, and it seems sort of medically necessary, then talk to us and we'll probably want some of our vet team to clean them up rather than having you do it. And same with toenail trims. If it seems like it's becoming uncomfortable, interfering with their normal gait, etc., we might opt to do a toenail trim. But if they're just getting a little bit long, maybe just do a few more trips around the block on some concrete, because toenail trims are really invasive things for a lot of dogs, and our goal is to build their confidence and trust in people, and toenail trims can set it back pretty fast for a lot of these dogs. And probably no large gatherings would be advised, even for a foster that's available and friendly with people. If you're planning to have a huge dinner party, assuming these things are starting to happen again, wasn't so much a problem for a couple of years, but that might be a good time to let them chill out in a crate with a stuffed Kong. Or if it's going to be a really big to do, you're having a whole lot of extended family visit with a bunch of kids, that could be an opportunity to just have them refostered or come back to hang out at the shelter for a weekend if you need to. That's okay, if we think that's going to be a big stressful event. As far as other pets, we do not cat test dogs. If they come to us with some past history of owners reporting that they're not good with cats, we'll put cat restrictions on. If we think they have higher than average fixation on critters out on walks at the shelter, we might put no small animal, no cat restrictions. But we don't set them up to cat test them because it's not proven to be reliable, and it's not very ethical to the well-being of our cats, who are also under a lot of stress in the shelter, to have to be subjected to a bunch of dogs. So we might not have any real knowledge about how they're going to be with a cat. So use management, use very slow introductions, and a lot of caution if you are bringing a dog with an unknown history in. And if you see concerning behavior that seems predatory, it might mean that's good information for us. Don't feel bad if we need to bring the dog back or refoster. It gives us some valuable information of what we need to look for in a home, and then we might put a cat restriction on them. If you do have other dogs at home and you're fostering a dog that can go with dogs, we do have a short, I think 15-minute video that will have you watch about multi-dog household considerations, and setting that up for success, whether it's the introduction and just managing the multi-dog household. The most common cause of conflict between foster dogs and resident dogs has been issues related to resource and food guarding. So feeding, when fosters have fed in the kitchen with bowls right next to each other, or given everyone a rawhide at the end of the night, it has been a recipe for problems. And I'd say almost all of the dog fights that have been reported to us, between the fosters and the resident dogs, have been because of situations like this. So our request, our rule is feed the dog separately. You know, we can lend you a crate. You can feed your foster dog in a crate while your resident dog eats in the kitchen, or separate them in different rooms at mealtime. If you're going to give Kongs, chew bones, etc., again, maybe on other sides of a baby gate, one dog in a crate, tethered on either side of the living room while you're watching. Just don't set up situations where there might be conflict and disagreements about who owns what. And in general, some good practices, having your dog drag a leash during those first few days in your home while you're supervising, so that you can intervene if you do discover that dog has a little bit more fixation on the cat than you'd like, or you have a dog that's not fully house trained and you need to kind of keep them with you so you can supervise. That gives you some easy way of managing the dog. Plan for some type of confinement area where your dog can be. We can provide a crate, but if the dog isn't crate trained, think about if you've got a baby gate where you can find them in, you know, a mud room or a laundry room or in a hallway, in the kitchen. Sometimes we can even lend out things like exercise pens. I think we probably have some extra ones at the shelter, which are sort of a larger confinement situation, bigger than a crate, gives them a little bit more space to move if you have a dog that is bothered by close confinement, but still keeps them kind of contained and under your supervision. As we were saying, reward the things that you like with good treats. We can often give you recommendations. We often know the dog's preferences in their time with us, what treats they particularly like and what they're less motivated by. And again, talking about choice and not using aversives. We don't want to use physical force to move them. If you need them to get up off the couch or come back in from inside, think about luring with treats, tossing them on the ground rather than physically forcing the dog. If they have something in their mouth that you need to get, trade for treats. Don't try to remove objects from their mouth or test what they do with the food bowl if you reach for it. And as I was saying before, allow them to choose when and whether to interact, and use the 3-second rule of petting, meaning pet for 3 seconds, pause, and see if they nudge you for more or if they shake off and walk away. And good if you do have a dog that you will be introducing to potential adopters, that's always good information to give them as well, to set them up for a successful intro with the dog. All right, so I'm going to toss it over to Moni. If she has anything she wants to add or talk about, you know, her experience when she brings dogs to her home, any tips she might tag on to the things I've talked about. And then we really want to hear from you. So be getting your questions ready and typing them in and we will address those.
So, hey everyone, so glad that you're here, and it's nice to see faces and names. I think that, you know, as Angela was talking, I was sort of just, you know, I was going to say, oh, here are the 5 things that I like to do or that I think about. And then actually the list just keeps getting longer and longer, but because there's so many good things that Angela shared, but you know, really, you know, a lot of times people are like, oh gosh, you fostered so many dogs, or you foster a lot of the behavior dogs. So, you know, what, you know, you must really train them or something like that. And it's like, I don't, you know, probably the number one thing is just thinking about providing structure, having a schedule, doing the exact same thing over and over, having some normality. And particularly, that there'll be dogs that have been astray and might not know how to be in a house. And that's actually why they have behavior issues, just because they just have never done this before. And so by being able to provide that normal structure is really super helpful. So that actually is that number one thing that I always think, and then just everything else is, how do you minimize that stress? And just give the dog time to relax. I think, as Angela said something before about body language, I'd also, because we're just watching, are they really stiff? Are they relaxed? Are they turning away? I actually, since I have my own dog, that when we do the interactions, that's always something to watch. Is it, they just seem really tense, even if they're not interacting, or are they just really relaxed, even if they just aren't looking in any direction, but they just seem sort of chilled and okay. And that I do a lot of that just watching in the household, like, when one dog passes the other, what are they doing? How's that body language? I also listen a lot to the tone of voice. If they're, my current foster Julius just loves like running around, and he wants to interact and play with my dog Maddie. And he'll bark, and she will bark back. And, sometimes it's she's barking back by, he's like racing around, and she's like, hey, I sort of want to play, but I'm sort of old and I don't really like running around, but I'm going to bark. And and you're like, oh, okay, that's an okay bark. And then there are times where he's like racing around and he's starting to annoy her a little bit. And you can just hear in her voice that she's like, hey, kid, stop trying to run into me, and she's just giving him some warning barks. And luckily, actually, Julius has really good dog sense and seems to like, oh, okay, all right, I'm going to listen along. And then he's going to race around someplace else in the yard. But just listening to the tone of voice is really helpful, because there are times where they'll be playing and barking all that, and then you'll just hear the tone start to shift, and you're like, oh, time for them to take a break from each other, because it's starting to where they're just not real happy anymore. So that's a really super helpful thing. And then, things around, like the baby gates are amazing and fabulous, and I really recommend it. And I have multiple gates, and somewhere they're attached to the wall, so I can just quick and open and shut and let them dog in. And then I also have some that are loose that I can sort of sometimes use as to corralling or to block off a room. Because it just helps with reducing stress, keeping people apart, the dogs apart. Things of places, of thinking about that context of where, because a dog might be totally fine in one context, and then the context might change. So I had one dog who was really super fearful meeting new people. And so, we, in terms of practicing, and I'd gotten some great advice from the shelter about what to do and how to practice. And so I'd be practicing, and I'd have people come and sit in the backyard, and sit at the table, and the dog would be like, great, this is all fine. And then like my brother was here doing some practice with us. And then he stood up, and the dog was like, wait, who's this new person? Even though it was sitting, it was fine. But then standing up, that was it just felt like it was a whole new thing. So to not be surprised at that, even a small change in context can add that stress, and you're going to have to sort of start over again, and just be like, okay, it's all right, and help the dog adjust there. Sort of places that I found, like, where are key places in the house where sort of multi-dog household where that can just increase the stress. Doorways, like who gets to walk through the doorway? The kitchen, right? Always, it's like, no, one dog at a time in the kitchen. Certainly with treats, as Angela said, or chews. And then also just the petting, like, who's getting love, and that sometimes my dog will get a little jealous, and you can just sort of tell that she's like, hey, I want love too. You're giving all the attention to the foster. So, just recognizing that and making sure that then, I might put Julius on the other side of the baby gate, and then, we'll give plenty of attention to Maddie, or Julius will go to bed early and in his crate. And then Maddie gets a little extra special time. So, in terms of really thinking about just how, all of those little pieces, I think I wrote down meds work. So, of being able to say, I can say with my current foster, Julius, it's that I have such respect now for parents who have kids who have really severe ADHD, because you can tell when his meds are wearing off. And I was able to work with the shelter to sort of spread the meds out a little and have a really good, so that he's much more even. And he's happier, he's more focused, he enjoys life, and rather than when the meds are wearing off, that then, he is sort of bouncing around and seems, just really sensitive to a lot of things that are going on. And so it's like, yes, absolutely. The chemistry is an important thing there. I think that if let me just think. I've sort of hit on them. Not to be afraid to ask for help. And just even if it's a quick question, but also I know I've turned to Angela with more complicated situations, and she's really helped a lot and in amazing ways. And sort of advice of what to try, and in what context. I do things, try to use a clicker, but I don't do a lot of complicated clicker training, but just the what's reinforcement. But that there's one dog who just really had a hard time meeting people, and then some examples, and Angela had really helped me through being able to say when to click, how to do that. And so I really recommend to not be afraid. It's the asking the questions is how we get better and how we can help the animals. It's not, we're not admitting that we somehow can't handle it. So don't hesitate to reach out to Anne Marie and Angela and talk about what sort of help you might want or need. And then probably the last thing is, I'm just going to share in the chat just some books. So in terms of what I've learned from the folks at the shelter, sort of anything by Patricia McConnell. They have a great pamphlet at the shelter, The Cautious Canine. And it's really, really little, but it's like jam-packed full of stuff. So that's really helpful. There's also the link that I have there, that actually my favorite book that Angela suggested, and I have given it away to people and I've bought one, and I actually was just looking that I must have given it away again. It's called Fired Up, Frantic, and Freaked Out. And it has, sort of, it's about reactive dogs, but even if it's not about reactive, if you not worried about reactive dog, there's so many great things of how to slowly help a dog adjust to new situations, or the steps that you can take. It's really practical. It's really easy to read. It's not overly dense. And so it's fantastic. I would absolutely recommend it to any foster. And hopefully you'll find it helpful too. I think that, and the other is I guess maybe the last thing I'll say is just to make sure that you also take some joy in the small victories. So in terms of being able to say, like, my current foster, Julius, was not housebroken when I had him, and it's been 2 months now, and he's pretty much, he will sit by the door when wanting to go out. Every now and then there's still, we still might have an accident. And I freely admit that each time there's been an accident, that is my fault. He's been giving me the signals, and I've been like, oh, I'm going to just do one more thing. The last time was, I'm like, oh, I need to get the laundry out, and so it's like, okay, that was on me. That's not the dog, because he was telling me he needed to go out. Just the victories of being able to say, hey, he can do this. Right now he is sleeping right next to me, and which is awesome. And actually here, I'm just going to can I able to, if either Angela or Anne Marie, can you let me share screen? Oh, there we go. Thank you. So this is Julius. He loves ice. He's been dragging around chunks of ice from the backyard. And let's see if I can, and sort of victory of him settling down with his little stuffed animal and toy. And and then here was sort of early on where he's like, oh, I'm interested in things that are going on. And so it's just being able to say, hey, he's made such great progress, and and that taking the joy from remembering that this is why we foster, right? Because this gives the animal that chance to like be a pet, to enjoy life, to be out of the shelter, to learn how a normal just day to day goes, so that then when they do get adopted, that they can be really super successful. So and that's where you're like, yay, this is fantastic. So it's, don't be afraid to take a blue dot dog, or even one of the behavior dogs, because the reward is just so high then. So yay.
That's so great, Moni. What? Am I muted? No, I'm good. Okay. We're getting some questions rolling in. One thing I want to add on to what Moni put in the chat about some of those recommendations. A lot of those we can lend out to you. We've got a lot of copies of many of Patricia McConnell's little pamphlets, Cautious Canine, and some other ones she's written about separation anxiety, reactivity, house training, etc. So those are usually nice because they're not huge reads, and have some good information. So you're welcome to pick those up from us. And the Fired Up, Frantic, and Freaked Out, we have a couple copies as well that we can lend. So don't feel like you need to go out and spend money, though they're great resources that you might want to have with your own dogs as well. We can lend a lot of those out to you. And one thing I wanted to ask Moni, just following what you were talking about, is you sort of talked about paying attention to Maddie's tone of voice and responses and when she's getting a little jealous. Are there any other things you do for your pets to help minimize the stress of having foster dogs coming in and out of your home?
Yeah. Well, there are two things. That one, I will give all of the credit to all of my dogs. That the credit first goes to them. And actually the success of fostering for so long and with so many animals is even the dogs that I had before Maddie, they actually, I think, taught my foster dogs more than I ever did. And so in this, and I had one of my dogs pass away. And so I was looking for another one to be in the household. And so actually I talked to the shelter folks about looking for a dog specifically who would be good with other dogs and who would be good with sort of dogs coming in and out of the household. And so Maddie was one that that really was a good fit. I try to really make sure that she understands that that she will always stay, right? The other dogs come and go, but she's always stays. The fosters always sleep at night in a crate. I have a crate in the bedroom, but that they sleep in a crate. They get the bird cage cover over the crate, so then they settle down, and Maddie gets to sleep up on the bed. And so of being able to just have that where you're sort of reinforcing what is your dog get. On the other hand, just being able to say, hey, we get to do lots of cool things. So she gets a lot more treats when there's a foster in the house. So normally she might get, like treats every now and then, but if the foster dog is getting put in the crate and is getting a Kong and maybe a puzzle toy, Maddie gets treats then too. And so it just reinforces that, hey, when this other dog is here, I get good stuff too. And so that gets reinforced. And so I think that those are the main things, but I will also totally admit that I've often had, for many, many years, multi-dog households. And I know that's just not for everybody. And to just really know yourself well, of how tolerant are you for that, um, there's sometimes where I've had two dogs and a foster, and then the barking does get a little out of hand sometimes. So, if that's not your thing, then, you might want to just think about, are there other ways to help the foster program or the shelter in general?
Great. And I think you said like she gets more treats when we have fosters, whereas normally she'll get them now and then. As if normal isn't you having a foster, Moni. I don't know when you ever don't have a foster dog in your home. All right. So we've had a few questions pop in, and I hope you keep them coming. I think we'll start to kind of jump into it. The first one is it still a no-no to take foster dogs to a pet store or Lowe's? In the past, my foster dogs are either court case or harbor custody. And Anne Marie, feel free to hop in if I say anything incorrect or that you would disagree with as far as the rules. I would definitely say no big public outings for safe harbors or court cases. I mean, probably chances are slim you would run into the wrong person, but there are definitely privacy concerns with both of those situations. So I think probably the lower key you can keep it, the better. And in general, for a foster dog that's an HSHV dog, I still think pet supply stores and Lowe's and those big kind of high stimulation outings are probably not in their best interest. There are a lot of potential triggers, a lot of stressors. Again, we're kind of thinking about wanting to decompress and reduce stress and maybe do gradual desensitization to things in doses that they can handle and build their confidence. For most dogs, going into one of these places is going to be like I was saying, toss them into the deep end of the swimming pool. There are a lot of things that even our own dogs can be disturbed by in these situations. So traffic in the parking lot, lots of cars going by, shopping carts being pushed, whether out in the parking lot or in the building, the automatic doors sliding, the sounds from the PA, the other people, the other animals if you're in, a pet supply store. So it's a lot. I know the idea is kind of like, oh, I want to get them more exposure, have more people see them, do training around those things. But I think that it's probably not going to be, for most fosters, the best environment. It's going to be a lot for them to take. So I would probably think about lower key settings would be preferable. I see Anne Marie nodding, so I don't think I said anything wrong. Okay. I don't know, Moni, do you have any feedback about places that you like to take your dogs to maybe give them exposure or to work on getting them more comfortable with things?
Yeah, I think that right now with COVID, right, it's really hard because you're not really going anywhere. Which has been super hard for the dogs that get adopted, because they'll say, well, how do they do in this situation? And I'm like, well, I'm not really sure. But like before then, of working with the shelter, of are there events that that you could take a dog to? So there might be something in a park, or there might be a festival, and that those are good. And then you will be the only dog there, and it'll just be with the people. I think that I like, with any sort of situation where the dog might be in public or meeting people, of think about sort of the recommendations for any sort of training process is that they'll say, start small, do one thing at a time. And so it might be, I'm going to first, meet people on the street, or neighbors as I'm walking by, and so they just see someone and they're like, oh, this is okay. And especially with fearful or anxious dogs, that you're not throwing too many different variables at them at one at a time. There were times where, we could be at the shelter. And so having a foster dog and hanging out for, maybe it was an hour or maybe a half an hour, or even just coming in and then leaving, so that they got used to going into some place. But that was always helpful. And then sitting, sometimes I'd go to the shelter and just sit with the foster dog there for, for a couple of hours, and then they would see people of different sizes. They'd see, different kids, they'd see elderly people with walkers, or, sort of lots of different things where they would learn, and you could sort of go around the corner and handle that better than, sort of in a place where you might not be able to control the variables as much. So, and then in those situations of watching the dog, like how stressed is the dog, how relaxed is the dog, having treats that people can give them, but is the dog comfortable taking a treat from someone else? If you're not really sure about that foster dog, then better to avoid it altogether, and start with something that's much lower key.
Great tips. Our next question is sort of two parts and fairly different topics, so I'm going to do it one at a time. So the first part is, do you ever send these types of dogs who don't respond to fostering to places like Best Friends or Villalobos for more extensive training? So one thing I'll say is, if we have a dog that is not responding to fostering, that suggests to me that their behavior problems may be so significant that they're going to have trouble being successful in a home environment, because we have great fosters, often fosters who have more knowledge and ability to manage and train than your average adopter. So if we're not seeing success, or we're seeing problems that are so severe that fostering no longer seems like an option, then I think what you would really be looking for via a place like Best Friends is not necessarily more extensive training, but sanctuary, and meaning there would be no intention of adopting out, that the dog would go there to live for the rest of their life. And what I'll say about some of these high profile places like Best Friends, which are fabulous and wonderful, is that there are a lot of dogs in need. And the last I knew, Best Friends was not taking dogs for sanctuary anymore. We have reached out to some of these places a couple times for sanctuary options to these high profile places, and have not been successful. They've not been able to take the animals. And Best Friends is very much an exception in the sanctuary world. In animal welfare, we talk about this kind of concept of sanctuary. No doubt there are probably a very small handful of other places like Best Friends that have, acres and acres and acres in the Utah countryside for dogs to run free and live their best lives in situations other than a human family home environment. But there are, for every Best Friends, there are many, many more that you would really question. And I've watched the videos of these sanctuaries that are essentially hoarding situations, crates and basements, every nightmare situation you would think of. It's no way to live a life. And so, we think about sanctuary, we have to be super, super careful. The good places are full. So it's just not really an option, as much as we would like to think it is. And it might not be the most ethical, humane option for a lot of these dogs. So what we do is reach out to, if we have a shortage of fosters, dog that's struggling, we will often reach out to breed rescues. We sent, many of you might remember Bailey. She just went to Coonhound Rescue and is probably living her best life on a farm in Canada while she waits for her forever home now, with people who are Coonhound lovers and used to her vocalization. So we often can do placements like that. So we will reach out for other options if we're limited in what we can do. But I would say that our success in finding some of these, big name sanctuaries to help us out has not been successful because, frankly, everybody wants to send their unadoptable dogs to Best Friends, and they're pretty full. second part of that question was, can a dog be cured of separation anxiety enough to leave a foster and be adopted? And that is a great question. And the exciting thing is that yes, like almost more than any other behavior problem, separation anxiety is absolutely modifiable. And the great thing is that we have pretty specific protocols, like recipes for how to do this. There is some pretty good research and information and structured plans of how to help a dog through separation anxiety. That said, it's not an easy thing to do, and not everybody can arrange their routines and lifestyles and households to be able to do it. So whether it's an owner or a foster with the dog with separation anxiety, we'd be talking about, certainly COVID has made it a little more feasible because a lot more people are home, working from home a lot more of the time. But it does require some arrangements while you're working on building up the time that a dog can be comfortable being alone. But when people are able to do that, and we can troubleshoot and problem solve how to make it happen, there are good protocols with good success. We have absolutely had dogs go to foster for some help with separation anxiety and make progress and be adopted out. I will say that in those cases, we don't assume that because the foster was able to leave for an hour, that means there won't be some regression in the new adoptive home. With big transitions like that, there likely will be regression when they're going to a new family, or sometimes even when families move or their work schedules change. There can be regressions in separation anxiety that can be worked through again. But it gives us some information to tell that adopter and give them a plan of something we know has worked. And I can think of some cases that we've had very good outcomes. We've had fosters who have been able to really work on a plan and get to a place where they're like, yes, this dog is showing progress. I'm able to get to a departure of this long. And then we send them out with that information and access to resources and professionals, and the families have successfully worked through it as well. So absolutely, I would say, can have a very good prognosis, probably even more so than some things like reactivity or aggression that tend to be harder to modify. Which is why some trainers hate working with separation anxiety and some love it. And when I talk, when those of us who like it kind of talk about it, it's because you can see progress, you can measure progress, and there's a way to do it. Do you have anything that you've had some dogs with some separation anxiety, Moni, that you've mentioned? Anything that you found or learned about that?
I think that, it is just the following the protocol and trusting the protocol, and saying, okay, how do you start? And, I mean, with Julius, where he would get really frantic, if I just even went and took the garbage outside, and to be able to say now over 2 months of just sort of one being normal, just normal structure, but then also being able to say, see, I came back. Right. And that, oh, okay, yeah, you're coming back. And so now, when it snowed and I've gone outside and shuffled, I've been able to leave him outside the crate. He doesn't rip stuff up, or destroy things, that a lot of times he's just hanging out at the window watching, but that's really good. And that it's just reinforcing that, see, people come back, and, that, and then the medication, right? Be diligent about giving the medication when it's supposed to be given. Even if you think that it's not. And he's actually, I would say that it's now where he's great, for about 4 hours, and sometimes a little bit longer. He starts getting more, a little bit more riled up and anxious and ready to go, but for longer than that. But that's, hey, this is progress. So so I think, and there are people who are absolutely perfect for that sort of situation, where they're maybe working from home, or they want to take the dog with them to the office, that they're willing to work on that. So sometimes you just have to wait long enough for the right adopter to come around who's willing to sort of fit with that dog.
Next question is, what is your take on running with the foster, starting slow, of course, but would such exercise be good for the foster? Well, with so many things, I would say it depends, and partially that would be first a question around with an individual dog that you might be fostering. The first person to answer that would be our vet team, just to make sure that there's no actual physical reasons that that dog should not run. Potential reasons we might not want them doing such high impact exercise like running would be young age. With our running program at the shelter, we like dogs to be at least a year before we put them on that list to go for runs with volunteers, because they're still developing and their joints and growth plates are closing, and there can be some damage, orthopedic damage, if there's really repetitive high impact pressure on those joints at that age. So age might be a consideration, weight might be a consideration. Certainly running can be a nice part of our weight management plan for a dog, but if the dog is already overweight, we'd probably want to take some pounds off before they start with more slower hikes and walks, and other exercise before doing something that puts so much pressure on the joints. So I think the vets would probably, be concerned about a very overweight starting such vigorous exercise. And, just any other health or physical considerations, physical structure, any knee issues that they've detected, hip problems. Obviously, if you have a heartworm positive foster, absolutely not. They'll probably give you those instructions, and maybe brachycephalic breeds with the pushed in bulldog noses and stuff can have a hard time with running. So I think it depends a lot on the physical condition of the dog first and foremost to make sure it's safe. And also given kind of like temperature and all that. Right now it's pretty okay for running, but when it's 80 degrees, dogs don't cool themselves particularly fast, especially those bulldog types. But for a lot of them, we've got a healthy, physically fit, energetic dog, which so many of our blue dot dogs are, like Mr. Julius there. Running probably could be a good outlet for them, and like you said, starting slow. I often like to do even go into a program like for humans, the Couch to 5K, which is a very interval program that builds up how much running versus walking over time. Even if you're a marathon runner, might be good to follow a program like that to get your foster dog into running shape rather than just going out for a 5-mile run right away. So I guess my answer would be yes, but make sure that there are no other considerations first, particularly health related. How do you get a dog comfortable with the plastic fastening clips on a harness? My dog is so anxious as I put his harness on, but immediately relaxes once he's fastened in. I'm not aware if he's ever been pinched, but we struggle each day. Do I need a behavior consult for this? So I think, there's some things you can do to desensitize to some of those elements of harnessing. And one thing that we often don't think about, we think about harnessing being things dogs might object, being like it coming over their head or they're pinching their skin or things like that. Sometimes I have seen dogs that are sound sensitive, not liking the little click sound that the plastic fastener makes. And so sometimes we don't think about desensitizing to that aspect, but not a bad idea to perhaps before even putting the harness on, just do some classical conditioning, just like you would do like with a clicker or something, that the sound of that clip starts to predict the treat. So without the dog wearing it, you could hold that buckle in your hand and kind of far away from the dog's ear, close it, make that click, and then immediately hand them a treat. Open it again, make a quiet little click sound, feed a treat, gradually see if you can be doing it closer and closer to the dog. If they show any signs of avoidance, that the noise is freaking them out, then muffle it some more, move it farther away from your dog's ear, kind of wrap it in your pocket or something, but getting them more and more comfortable with the sound first, because that's an element of harnessing that we often don't think dogs would be sensitive to, but sometimes are. And then, at the shelter when we work on harnessing, trying to make it as non-invasive and cooperative as we can. And I like to think about what's moving. Is the dog moving into the harness, or is the harness moving towards them? So we can teach them to very cooperatively target their nose through the opening, stick their whole head through, move in it far enough to be around their shoulders, and then kind of working on that clipping, tightening the strap gradually. Sometimes I might also get them used to the feel of it on their body by holding it up and having them walk by it, and it brushes along their body and they get treats. So they get used to stuff just touching them, maybe draping it over their back, not actually like wearing it, but it's on them and I'm feeding. And so we can kind of get them used to all those little elements gradually in small pieces, doing some of those things. There is a really good video on YouTube, which I'll type it in the chat in a second when I'm not speaking. But the Kiko Pup channel, it's a great resource. It's Emily Laralham is the trainer who does her Kiko Pup channel, puts tons and tons and tons of free video tutorials for all manner of issues. She's a positive trainer and she's a fabulous trainer. Kind of whenever, especially when I'm thinking about basic common dog training questions, Kiko Pup channel is a really good one to go to. And she has a fantastic one about desensitizing to a harness, which is what I tend to send people to watch if it's a client or a foster or something. So I'll put that in the chat for you, or you guys can always pop us an email. We're happy to do a behavior consult if you want to work on breaking that down to the desensitization process even more, or you're running into problems. Absolutely, we could do that, but there are some other resources if you don't want to invest that time quite yet.
Hey, Angela, I would add one other thing, just of also finding something that you feel comfortable with. Because if you're comfortable with the action of getting the harness on, then you're also not communicating your stress to the dog. Because if you're stressed, then the dog will get stressed. And so, I've found that sometimes dogs don't like it going over their head, but they are, if I do it differently and I have their feet go through, they're willing, like you can practice paw, like you give one, put one paw in, put the other, and then it loops around the back. So they're actually not putting anything over their head or their face. And that's something that I then am comfortable with. And I found that I can be successful at that. And then the dog trusts that I'm being successful, and then they can be successful. So it's finding your, what can work for you as well. So, and that's where it's sort of the videos can be really helpful, because you can see, this doesn't work, but that does. So then you can be successful and the dog can be successful.
How to handle a foster dog using his nipping to ask what he wants? That's a great question. I bet that's probably a common thing with some of our blue dot dogs who can tend towards mouthy, and I'm sure Moni will be able to speak to that, especially given her current foster. So yeah, there are different ways dogs use their mouths, and not all of it is aggression, but it doesn't mean that we necessarily feel any better about them putting their teeth on us. So I'm going to assume, kind of in this example, we're talking about a dog that is sort of attention seeking, wanting you to interact or wanting you to throw the ball or take them outside. And the way they're getting that is by kind of coming up and being mouthing or light nipping or something. And dogs in general have become experts at learning that they can get a reaction and they can get attention by doing behaviors that the humans don't like, because we respond to those things, whereas all too often we don't pay attention when they're doing any number of things that we like. So I'm always a fan of being proactive, meaning let's try to set up situations where that never even happens. So I might think about making sure that dog has enough physical exercise and social attention and mental stimulation so that they have had all those needs met, and I don't have a restless, bored dog that's looking to get me to engage or do something with them. So making sure maybe I'm just proactively making sure getting those needs met, giving them other outlets. Often a dog like this might benefit from having some puzzle toys, having some enrichment feeders, things that they have to work to get their kibble, and we can lend those out to you, so that they're using their brains in different ways and giving you some downtime, giving you chews that they can put their mouth on rather than coming over and mouthing you for attention. Maybe thinking about when he's asking for something, what is it he's asking for? Is this how he's asking to go for a walk or to go outside and go to the bathroom or get some petting or, throw the ball, whatever. And thinking about, okay, maybe I can read signals earlier. Boy, they were pacing around and getting antsy and fussy right about this time of day. But I kept working on the computer, and then they come over and start getting mouthy because they want me to take them out for the walk. So reading those early signals of like, oh, maybe I should get up and let them out now before they start asking in less desirable ways. So we can read those cues and predict it and respond to more appropriate signaling, that would be ideal. If all the best efforts to be proactive fail and they do start mouthing, I would remove attention, stand up, walk away, and not let that nipping work. But then we also need to respond if the dog offers anything better. So if they can sit, if they can lay down, if they can refrain from nipping you for 10 seconds, then reinforce that with attention, taking them out, etc. And you could proactively teach them how to request those things. So maybe teaching them that you won't respond, you won't throw the ball if they come up and drop the ball and nip you, but if they come up and drop the ball, ask for a sit, and then throw the ball, but when they sit. So teaching them another way to ask for what they want. And Moni, I'm sure you have tips, especially given that you have Julius with you, and I imagine he might have done a little bit of that when you brought him home.
Yeah. Julius was I mean, I'll say was really mouthy, and it was almost like he didn't know how to communicate other than and even now sometimes he'll be lying next to me that he's not nipping anymore, but he'll want to be mouthy sort of on you're petting him, and he'll just like very gently want to chew on your hand, and you're like, this is, and he's not nipping anymore, but that it's almost like he doesn't know any other way to interact. So trying to provide those ways to say, hey, here's a chew, you can chew on this, you can't chew on me. But then also just the big getting up and walking away. I also do the that I'm going to respond if he nips me, and I'll go, and then pull back and walk away. And that it's that, or he gets that listening, the oral cue that he's heard. Oh, wait, that's something I recognize as that's not, she's not happy, that there's something that hurt. And that's sort of universal mammals that we respond in that way. And so just having things that he can learn. I really like trying to just say to do the wait as a sort of as a command, and that that he has to wait. And we do use wait a lot. So when we're putting on a leash, he has to wait. And when we go outside at the side of the door, he has to wait. And when he's getting his food, he has to wait for that when he sits. But that it's also, if we're going to play and we have a toy and he's just focusing on the toy and is so excited about the toy that he's likely to try to grab a hand, instead of the tug, that then of being able to say, okay, wait. And we just take a little bit of a pause, and then it's like, okay, now let's play tug. And here's how we play tug. And so, and I'll use the word, well, and that now he actually knows, and he'll go find his tug. If he wants to go play, I'll say, go find your tug, and he'll find it. So, not all dogs respond to words like that, but, it's sort of building on the same lessons that he's learning elsewhere, to say, oh, okay, I need just a little bit of control over himself and his excitement so that he's not nipping. So those are the things that I've been really working on with him.
And the other thing, I imagine you're probably pretty skilled at observing and working with too, Moni, is I find often paying attention to just arousal levels. And if the dog is getting more and more riled up or more excited, he's probably also getting more and more likely to start using his mouth inappropriately. Would you agree with that too? And so like, I
Yeah,
think,
absolutely. You sort of think about like little kids when they're tired and they're cranky and then they're running around and they're yelling and just, that they're so amped up, and you think dogs are sort of like that too. Their little brains just can't take anything more. They're just overstimulated, and then, they don't know how to control themselves anymore. So, sometimes that case of saying, okay, let's just walk away. We're going to have a little quiet moment here.
mhm,
And, or maybe a little time in the crate with the chew,
mhm.
just to calm down. And also with Julius, I'm like, oh, yes, you're right. It's coming up on your medication time. So, then, and I don't want to joke about that, but it really is where I can see with him when it's time, to have his next amount. So.
All right, so I think we are at 8 o'clock. And I think we got through all the questions, but does anybody else have anything they want to type in quick? Anything we didn't address? All right. Well, if anything does come up, this is absolutely not your last opportunity to get help or to get questions answered. So just a little bit of some reminders. Please feel free to reach out to us. You can contact Anne-Marie at the fosters@hshb.org email. And my email is angela.s@hshb.org. I'm always more than happy. I try to reach out within a day or so when dogs, especially dogs with some behavior concerns, are out in foster. But if you need help sooner, things come more immediately, or sometimes I assume things are going okay. But if you need some help, reach out. Like Moni said, don't feel like there's anything wrong with doing that. I am always more than happy to talk about dog training and behavior with anyone who's interested in listening. So if you want some resources, please know that we're here for you. I think Moni also offered that she is happy to help out and share her experience and expertise with you all as well. Is that true, Moni?
Yep.
Yep. So if you'd like to talk to another foster, she's a great mentor. Great. And she just put her contact information in the chat. All right. Well, thanks so much. And also let us know if there's things that you need more of. If there are certain resources you want, certain topics you'd like information on, if kind of sessions like this are useful. I always have this fantasy, and we've done a little bit of, and I would love to expand, having sort of a Zoom library of tutorials on working with reactivity and resource guarding and fearfulness. So if people are interested in those, are the nice thing is we can always do live sessions and record them for people in the future too. So if that's a format you find helpful and useful, give us feedback, let us know. And if there's specific requests or things you need, tell us. We want to make sure we definitely rely heavily on you. You make a huge difference in our ability to do the work we do. And we appreciate it and want to be there to support you in doing this. All right. Any last words, Anne-Marie or Moni?
No, I was just gonna add on, definitely, yeah, let us know if these training sessions are helpful, because we'd love to do more. We've been talking about it. So it's just helpful to know if you guys find them helpful. And then also just thank you all. We definitely appreciate you. And yeah, let us know if you have any questions or anything.
All right. Thanks so much for joining us, everybody, and thanks so much for fostering.
See you, everyone.
Thanks, Moni.
So actually, I was just going to ask you, Angela, is there anything that you wish that I would